welcome to your weekly reminder that only dead fish go with the flow. Today, I am literally sat on Laura Deas' sofa. Welcome to your own living room. Olympic bronze medalist in the Winter Olympics in skeleton. Hello and welcome. We've been talking for an hour already, but welcome to your own living room.
Thank you very much.
And owner of a Blue Peter badge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How did that come about, the Blue Peter badge?
So I helped out with the coaching, I guess, of the one of the presenters who's going to be doing a bobsleigh challenge.
Oh, top secret.
Top secret. I couldn't possibly tell you anything
Okay,
else about that.
fair enough. But we obviously had our phone call, and then I saw that you had a Blue Peter badge, and I know the demographics of this podcast, but I don't know how many people are going to be like, yeah, Blue Peter. But I was like, that is so cool.
Honestly, it was just so exciting. I think people of our-ish age,
Yeah.
like it's an iconic thing. And
It
it's
is.
so hard to get one. Apparently you can only get one by being on camera for Blue Peter. There's no other way that you'll get awarded with one. So they are few and far between.
Is it going to go next to your medal?
Oh,
Your
yeah.
bronze medal?
Yeah.
Blue Peter badge, Olympic medal.
I had to put a tiny little frame.
Perfect. Would you like to sort of name and explain your sport a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So I did a sport skeleton for 15 years. I've now retired, but feel still very much immersed in it. So skeleton is probably the one that looks the most crazy if you ever tune into the Winter Olympics, because it's the one that's head first on ice. So we go down the track at speeds of anything up to 90 miles an hour, head first on a small sled. And we contend with lots of corners. So every track is unique. So we have to drive our way down the track once we've jumped onto the sled. And the corners generate a huge amount of pressure as well, along with the speed. So sometimes we're experiencing up to 5 Gs of pressure in the corner as well. So it's an extreme sport, which is I think is a really nice mixture of adrenaline and fun, but also being very cool and calculated at the same time.
I've been so excited about this episode. I've literally told every group chat I'm on that I'm about to go and talk about skeleton, which is something that I know absolutely nothing about. So hopefully I'm going to ask the questions that other people know nothing about as well. So what would training for skeleton look like?
So our year is really segmented into 2 very distinct halves. So we have the half of the year when we're out on ice doing the sport, which consists mainly of sliding. But with a caveat with the sport is that because it's extreme and because you've got the pressure and the speed that I was talking about, and the fact that you hit walls and make mistakes and so on, you generally wouldn't do more than 3 runs a day. So we would do a typical training day, 2 to 3 runs at the track, and then we would supplement that probably with a training session at the gym, along with all the other things that come with the sport. So you've got your recovery sessions, you'd have learning to do, so track, whether that's a track walk, whether that's track kind of intel that you're trying to learn more about the ice. And then you've also got the sled maintenance side of things as well. So the sled is quite a complex bit of kit that you're trying to maintain. So you've got all of that stuff. And then the other half of the year, which we call summer, even though really it encompasses spring, summer and some of autumn, is your physical work, basically. So we are based at the University of Bath, and the athletes basically do power training essentially. So we're pushing a heavy object on ice and we're trying to accelerate it as fast as possible at the top of the track before we jump on it. So really, to do that, you need to be strong and powerful. So most of our training encompasses weightlifting and sprinting and pushing and pulling heavy objects. So basically very, very little cardio, and it's all strength and power.
Do you ever have to do I'm trying to think of the right word, like almost pressure simulation type things? Is like a chamber or anything that you ever end up in?
We don't do not in the same way that you might do altitude or temperature testing or training, but we do a huge amount of visualization as well to mentally put yourself in those situations, because as I said, the maximum you could probably do in one day is 3 runs down a track. So if a run is, average is about 60 seconds, you're getting 3 minutes of exposure to the sport a day.
Okay.
So supplementing those 3 minutes of reality with your visualization is really, really important. And also to stay in touch with the sport through those months when we're not on the sled as well. Because I mean, I can't really think of any other sports other than the ice sports that where you don't actually do the sport for
Mm.
months and months and months of the year.
The only thing I can think of is maybe like very high diving. I think maybe they don't. I actually don't know this as a fact, but I don't know that they do repetitive of
Mm.
the high dive because it is like pressure and everything. I
It's
think
hard on the body. Yeah.
maybe they supplement it with gymnastics a
Yeah.
bit. That's the only thing that springs to mind
Yeah.
other than other ice
Yeah. It
sports.
sounds very, very similar. I think that they probably do a huge amount of visualization
Yeah,
to get all of those movements coordinated, and then just don't expose themselves too much to the actual, I suppose, physical dangers of the sport.
yeah. That is. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm trying to stay focused. So your training schedule is slightly different to you obviously spend half the time on ice, half of the time training in a gym over summer. Do you do training camps abroad? Because obviously the UK is not, not known for its snow and its ice. I think the a few winters when we did get snow, we would get a massive bit of tarpaulin sheet and we'd like all pile on the tarpaulin and like fly down the hill because we're based in the Cotswolds where it's very hilly, and that was maybe the closest I've ever got to skeleton. But then we did go through a fence at the bottom of the hill, so we stopped doing that. Are you doing any of the ice work in the UK or is it all abroad?
So there's no ice in the UK. So what we would do, the closest we can get is the push track facility at the University of Bath. So that is a recreation, I guess, of the first 50 to 60 meters of a track. So it's basically a downhill slope. So
Mm.
that's where we can push a sled, albeit on rails rather than on ice. So that's the closest in the UK that the athletes get to doing the sport through the summer. In the past, we have done camps to ice houses, they're called, where you have basically the refrigerated version of that, just the push part of the performance. Um, some years we do, some years we don't. Depends on budget, depends on what the plans are.
Mm.
So we are at a bit of a disadvantage, I would say, because we're probably one of the few nations that may not have pushed on ice, may not have got on our real sled until it gets to October and time to slide again. But it really does vary from country to country what facilities people have access to.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, when you said facility, obviously you meant Bath, but I was thinking of like Gloucester ski slope.
Yeah, no, we don't. You would think that we would be somewhere like the Snowdome,
Yeah.
or an ice rink, that kind of, that's where we'd be hanging out. But no, not actually.
Do you have a favourite part of the sport?
I think so. There's two things. I think I love the fact that you have to get really immersed in the equipment side of the sport. It's an equipment-based sport, and there's no getting away from that. So it's one of the key elements of performance is having cutting-edge equipment. And by equipment, I mean the sled that you're sliding on, um, the runners, which are the metal parts that are actually in contact with the ice. There's a lot of technology that goes into the how those are cut and how those are prepared. In the same way that someone might varnish their skis in a particular way for the snow, we go through a similar process. So there's that side of things as well. And then there's also all of the kit that you're wearing as well. So there's your suit, there's your helmet. So there's all kinds of things that you can focus in on and kind of try and refine and personalize. So you will spend your entire career trying to finesse that and trying to work out what works for you, again with these like very limited amounts of exposure to the sport. And again, that's where the UK is at a disadvantage, is that because we don't have an ice track,
Mm.
we can't do hundreds of training runs and replicate the same thing over and over again for testing. So we're always a little bit, on the back foot when it comes to that, and trying to innovate around the fact that we don't have a massive amount of exposure to ice. So that's a fascinating part of the sport, and that's something that kind of, I think, grows on you as
Mm.
you go through it. And not everyone will sort of naturally gravitate towards it. I don't have an engineering background. I don't have a sciencey brain or a mathsy brain, but I learned to love it because it has such a direct impact on performance.
One thing I did want to ask you about really quickly, when you're hurtling down the track, How do you stop yourself from hitting the walls?
Right. So you're driving the sled. To rewind even further, so before you start at a track,
Mm,
you will walk down it first. And
okay.
so to set the scene, you're walking down what's essentially a big ice sculpture. Most of them are concrete with topped with ice,
Mm,
although there is one that's completely naturally made every year from lake ice, which is amazing. That's in Switzerland.
that's amazing.
But essentially, it's like a concrete shell, which
Mm,
then ice is laid on. It's refrigerated, then ice is laid on top. And so the track crew at every track will have a particular way of shaping the ice. So it's like a giant sculpture basically that you're walking on. Um, and you're reading the ice in front of you and trying to work out what the sled is going to do and whether you want it to do that or whether you don't want it to do that. So this is another aspect of the sport which takes years to learn, is your ability to actually read the ice in front of you, look at a section of ice that's shaped in a particular way and go, right, okay, I think my sled's going to want to do, it's going to want to rise here more than actually what's going to be beneficial. Because what you're trying to find is the fastest line down the track. And with skeleton, you're working with the natural pressures that the corners give you. So as you go into a corner, the track turns, that turn and the speed pushes the sled up. So you get these natural oscillations, these waves where the sled goes up and then it loses momentum and it comes down. So most corners you're rising and falling.
mm,
And what you're trying to do is you match the natural fall of the sled with the exit of the corner. So basically, what you're doing is you're manipulating the natural line of the sled all the way down the track. You're working with the pressures and with the speed. So to start with, when you're a beginner, you're doing hardly anything other than focusing on being safe in holding your position. Um, and then as you get more experienced, you're then adding more steers. So most of the time, if you were to do nothing other than hold your position on the sled, you would get down safely, but you would hit a lot of walls along the way. So essentially as you get better at the sport, what you're trying to do is work out what to do to avoid taking those hits. Because obviously the fewer hits you take, the faster you go.
mm,
And then so when you become, the sort of the standard that you would then see on TV at the Olympics, it would be really unusual to see someone hit a wall probably then, because you're at a point where you can manipulate the sled well enough to avoid making those mistakes. So, but it's a really interesting mixture of planning ahead to know what your plan is, but also then thinking in the moment when you're traveling at 30 meters a second, am I where I want to be? Yes, great. Or no, I need to change my plan quickly.
mm.
And so the best drivers are able to be very instinctive and react in the moment. So it's so tricky because you're trying to learn all these skills. You've got to have a plan, but you've got to be reactive, but you've got to read the ice, but you've got to be ready for anything. And also the ice might change every day as well. If the temperature changes or the track crew
Mm.
changed. So, it's a constant shifting
Is it when you're
situation.
going around these corners or when you're going down, is there any point where you're like slightly using your weight distribution to make these turns and make these
Yeah,
changes?
that's exactly it. So what you're doing is the sled is um, from the outside, all you can see is the carbon fiber shell. On the
Mm,
inside, there's a frame, which the runners, as I mentioned, they're like the ice skates that are the bit that are in contact with the ice, are attached at the four corners. So you're essentially trying to bend and manipulate the frame of the sled using your body and that then changes the way that the runners underneath you interact with the ice. So creating more or less friction. So basically you're twisting your body to twist the sled
yeah.
to move left or right. So if I was going to a right hand corner and I wanted to keep the sled from climbing too much, I'd press down with my right shoulder, my right knee.
Okay.
Um, and then obviously there's a flow and a subtlety to it as well, that you don't want to overdo it, because any time you're inputting into the sled, in theory, you're slowing it down as well, because you're creating friction. So that's another aspect to the sport is, you could get down really neatly without touching any walls, but if you're doing it by steering really hard, you're still going to be slowed. So
Okay.
you're also trying to balance doing just enough with it not tipping over into too much. So
It's interesting what you just described, because it's not the same, but there are parallels. And I think that happens with a lot of sports that I listen to or people talk about their different sports is there do end up being parallels, of course, across into other sports. And you were talking about reading the ice. In rowing, you would sort of read the water and see where the stream is, and you would look at the course beforehand if you were doing a head race, and there might be, a current going through the middle and you want to be in it or you want to not be in it in order to be fast or slow. And, the corners on the course. And we've got a rudder that is about the size of a credit card, and it's attached to your big toe on a wire, basically. And you have got to use it as little as possible on the corners in order to not slow it down. And when you're talking about weight distribution, we would use our weight distribution to obviously balance a boat on water, which is like the same width as your hips. And yeah, so it's really fascinating. Maybe rowing and skeleton are hand in hand, although you guys are going much, much faster than we are.
Yeah, you're working a lot harder.
We're going backwards, though. The art of reversing at speed backwards. I mean, but you guys are going, Jesus, so fast.
So there's that side of it. And then the other thing is, we on TV, it looks like a very individual sport because it's just you on the sled. It's just you on the start block, and it's only you that can get you down the hill. But really, it's probably the least individual sport there is out there because we work as a team um, so comprehensively when we're out on circuit together. I mean, we travel around as a team, so you're living with your teammates, so they become essentially like your second family. And you, again, as I said, we're working to try and make up for some natural disadvantages that we have by not having our own track. So one of the ways that we found that we can compensate for that is by working effectively as a team. So just putting aside the fact that, like, we're going to race against each other at the end of the week, and we all know that. But actually, until that point, we're all going to do so much better if we work together, collaborate, share information. So that's something that is kind of, again, is instilled into you, but you also learn it because I think it's a bit of a skill as well, learning how to collaborate with teammates and rivals and navigate that, and work with your coaches as well. So you build this really nice family, I guess. That's not really a family, but like your sort of second family, and these people that you rely really heavily on, but then you kind of share in the success at the end of it as well. So that's a lovely part of it.
That is a really lovely part of it. And I think sometimes that can be missed in different sports and it would be so easy for you guys to be so competitive against each other. And I don't doubt that you are competitive against each other, but that you still haven't foregone like that friendship and that teamwork, because I guess it can be quite lonely. If you're away from family and you're doing a camp and all of that sort of stuff. And I think when we spoke on the phone, you said there was a point where it was only 5 of you out there. And if you're not getting on, that is a really lonely place.
Yeah, it would be miserable. And, that was kind of a realization early on in my career, was that it was essential to have those friendships and to look after them. Because when you're in these really intense environments where you're expected to, race against each other at the end of the week, sometimes there may only be one spot available for a squad and you've got to race against your friend to get there. When you're in that person's environment all the time, there's a kind of mutual respect. And as I said, I do feel like it's a skill that you develop over time, the ability to kind of compartmentalize the fact that you are going to compete at the end of the week, but that actually you can't be in competition all the time because it's so exhausting. It would be completely unsustainable to feel like you're in competition with the person, that you're having dinner with or that you're sharing a bedroom with. You know what I mean? You've got to learn how to be able to do both and do it well. And the other side of it is that, especially when you're a beginner, you're all going through this same scary, exciting, crazy experience of learning this sport from scratch. And trying to get from total beginner that's never been down a track to, world-class standard within 2 years or less. There is very much a sense that you're all in it together as well, because you are all doing the same thing, experiencing the same highs and lows. And, you've got to pick each other up and make it work.
Mm.
And so you get these very strong bonds that are forged through these difficult experiences as well. So, some of my best friendships have come from the sport. And I think it's partly because they're sort of forged through adversity a lot of the time. So yeah, you have these experiences that you bond through, and you
Yeah.
come out the other side, you think, well, I couldn't have done that without that other person. So
The episode that I have lined up for tomorrow, actually, with Bella, who was in swimming, she said, like, all friendships are formed in the trenches, sort of thing. I think she phrased it better than that, but it was trenches and friendships, to be sure. We're going to go back for our Dying on the Hill onto culture, teamwork, and relationships, which is the clever umbrella that I've given that, or not so clever umbrella. Do you have a worst part of the sport or the training, or your least favourite part?
I think probably again two parts to that. So that I found getting into the level of physicality that you have to get to be world class at pushing a sled very difficult. I was completely untrained when I came into the sport. I'd never been into a gym in my life. That's not an exaggeration. I didn't know how to pick a weight up. So I was completely green, and I found it was pretty brutal getting my body used to lifting weights every day, sometimes multiple weight sessions in one day. And we needed to be insanely strong to be able to powerful enough to push a 30-40 kilo sled fast enough to be the best in the world at it. Because again, to go back to the fact that the Brits are at a disadvantage by not having their own track, one of the ways that we get round that, and certainly got round it in the early days of my career, was by being the best at the push. Because the push is where you initially accelerate the sled, and that's kind of your only momentum that you can add.
Mm.
Because once you're on the sled, it's you and gravity, and you're trying to avoid the walls, you're trying to drive a fast line, but you can't re-accelerate the sled. So the better your push is at the top, that advantage sort of multiplies down the track. So there was a lot of emphasis on needing to be the best in the world at pushing a sled. So going from being completely untrained to world class at that involved getting insanely strong in a very short period of time. I think I put on 12 kilos in a year.
Wow.
Just going from being someone that did riding and running and a bit of everything to someone that was in the gym all the time lifting weights. And that massively took its toll on my body, and it gave me back problems that I'll probably have forever. So that was really tough. And I think, the summers are so long. Sometimes you talk about being in the trenches. Sometimes I remember times when I'm absolutely exhausted. It's the middle of July. Everyone else is enjoying the summer,
Yeah, they're
and
going on
you're
holiday.
in a gym, lifting weights, and you just think, like, it's months till I'm going to be on a sled. Why am I doing this? So that, I think psychologically, that's quite a tricky aspect of the sport, is that, yeah, you're away from the actual sport for so long. Staying motivated through those difficult parts is tough. And I think, like, just to dwell on my own career a bit, probably the low point for me was missing out on the first Olympics that I could have qualified for. So when I came into the sport, I was part of a ring-fenced UK sport program to fast track our group of four from beginner to Olympic qualification within one cycle.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. How did you get into
Yeah,
this?
so it'd never been done before, and so we were all green. We'd been brought in because we showed certain physical attributes in testing that we might be good at the sport.
That's how I got into rowing. I'd done
Yes,
like oh God, I don't know, can't remember what it's called now, but they'd done like Tall and Talented,
exactly.
or
Yeah,
Giants That Grow, or
yeah, yes.
whatever it
Sporting
was.
Giants.
Sporting
Yeah,
Giants, there you go.
yeah. So I was part of Girls for Gold, which was kind of the precursor to that. It was
Okay.
sort of the first time it had been done in a very kind of official, organised fashion
Yeah.
by UK Sport, that using talent ID sports scientists to find people doing other things, and channel them into skeleton, and basically hope to produce Olympic medalists, because it was one of the sports that had been identified that it could be possible. You don't necessarily have to have done it since you were 4 or 5 years old to be able to be very good at it as an adult. So yeah, that's how That's how I came into it. And yeah, it's a bit of a wild ride. I can't remember where we were going with this.
Well, sorry, we were talking about, I interrupted you a little bit, but you were talking about your own early career missing out on
That's
the.
right. Yeah. So to yes, so to set the scene with UK sports. So it was a ring fenced sort of funded program, and with that, we got the best of everything in a lot of ways. So we got the best strength and conditioning, we got the best equipment, we got the best ice coaches, we got a lot of ice time, which again is something that is quite restricted normally. But along with that came a massive amount of pressure to be good quickly and to get results and to show that it worked, that the
Mm,
system worked. And the kind of backdrop to all of that was that we were being aimed at Sochi 2014 Winter Olympics. And to the point where we actually had it printed on the t-shirts that we trained in the gym every day. Sochi 2014 was on the t-shirts. So there was kind of no bones about it. It wasn't subtle. It was, that's what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, I had a reasonable trajectory through the sport. I improved year on year, and I got better, and you could literally, plot me on a graph getting a little bit better every year. But I didn't have a meteoric rise into being great at it. And so I missed out on that Olympics, on the Sochi 2014 Olympics. I was nowhere near at the standards basically to be competitive at a games. And in hindsight, it was obviously the right thing that I wasn't there. But at the time, when that's what you've, been training for, that's kind of your reason for being in the program, that
mm,
felt like such a huge failure that it was a kind of a crossroads for me, really. Because a lot of people were asking me as well when I didn't go to the games, kind of things like, are you going to stop now? Are you going to get a proper job now? Are you going to stop messing around? That sort of attitude was very much, was quite strong. I had to be quite, I had to make a decision at that point. Am I going to double down and actually, you know, continue and try and be the best in the world at this ridiculous sport that no one's ever heard of? Or am I going to call it quits? And that the competitor in me just wouldn't let me call it quits.
yeah, can't let it go.
No. So, and actually that was a really good, almost like a line in the sand where, because at that point I realized, I'm not a wonder kid. I am making slow and steady progress. It forced me to examine every bit of what I was doing and work out what I needed to do to make myself better, and kind of stop relying, I suppose, so much on the program providing everything for me
Mm,
and just assuming that it was going to turn me into a great athlete, and actually becoming a little bit more self-centered, kind of a bit more um, sort of introspective, I suppose, in working out what I in particular needed that possibly I wasn't getting or wasn't doing. And I was very lucky that at that point in my career, I also was working with some great people who really took the time to understand me as a person as well as an athlete as well, and really helped me bridge that gap. I mean, I've got a very specific memory of being asked to write a development plan of how I was going to get from where I was at the time, which was a Europa Cup level athlete, so kind of bottom rung of international tier competition, to the next Olympics. And I remember just staring at this blank piece of paper with like Olympics at the top and a Europa Cup at the bottom, and having no idea what those steps were supposed to be to get from A to B. Like, I knew that I needed to take them, but
mm,
I didn't know what they were.
yeah.
But luckily I had some really great coaching and support around that time to kind of help fill in those blanks. And then as soon as I had a path and a trajectory, and I worked out what I needed to do, then I was off. And then things started to really go from strength to strength.
It's really interesting because it's almost a moment of self-reflection. Like, I used to keep a training diary, and um I sort of really resonate with the big goal and then where you are at the time, and also the time that big goal might be 4 years away, or it might be 6 years away, or whatever it is. Like, how do you always fill that time, and how do you fill that time by getting better? And so for me, there was an element of self-reflection, and also at the start of every year I would write out what I wanted to achieve. I would set gold, silver, bronze targets, and I would have a few non-negotiables,
Mm.
and a few, if I get close to this, that would be great. And I would every week I would have also in my training diary 4 different, I guess, subjects in my head. I would have water technical points that needed to be worked on, gym technical points that needed to be worked on, and I would also have weights technical points that needed to be worked on, or focuses. And then I'd have a 4th, which was just, what do I need to do lifestyle-wise to sort of keep it ticking over in a good direction? And it was an element of having to learn to be a little bit more self-centered and prioritize myself. Like, I remember being told off by a coach when I was very young at 18 for taking my friend to A&E because she'd been really sick, and then I got, like, I don't agree with him telling me off for it, but she was really sick and I stayed with her all night, and then he said that I'd like jeopardized my own training the next day. And that's a very extreme example, but yeah, irrelevant. Very extreme example, but you do need to sort of learn to be more self-focused. It's
Yeah,
quite an interesting
definitely.
change.
Definitely. And I think you're learning how to be self-focused, but you're also learning how to learn a lot of the time as well, because that's something I realize is that I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
You know, like when you
Where do I start?
yes, if you don't know what you don't know, it takes somebody. You can do all of the self-reflection in the world,
Mm,
but if you don't know what the possibilities even are as to how to get better, it takes someone else to say, well, actually, I think we need to get, we really need to break down your technique, for example. We really need to work on your visualization. We really need to work on your recall so you can actually remember what you just did accurately. All of those things.
in a 60-second
Exactly.
period.
But as soon as I had those things to work on, as I
Yeah.
said, that's when I was away, because I was like, now I've got tangible stuff that I can measure and I can get better at. So all
Mm,
it really took was for someone to say, okay, let's focus less on the results,
mm,
because at the end of the day, they'll take care of themselves. What processes do we need to improve? And
yeah.
let's break those down and make them measurable, exactly as you just described. Into things like push, um, visualization, uh, recall, psychology,
Yeah.
recovery, all of those things. And yeah, as I said, as soon as you've got those things, or I found, as soon as I had those things that were measurable and defined, then I just got it just became so much easier, because I could see on any given day what it was I was supposed to be getting better at. So it sounds really obvious now, but back at the time, it was a massive revelation to me.
It does. It sounds really obvious. And then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, but it's so easy when you join a sport or you join a program or you join a team to be swept up in it
Mm.
and just be passive, at least
Yes.
for like the first year. And you go to the training and you see your friends and you tick the box, and then you go home and you don't think about it. And there is something to be said for being able to compartmentalize training and downtime. But there's also something to be said for like writing a note before you go to training. Today I'm going to focus on X,
Yeah.
going to the session, making sure that's what you focus on, coming back. Today I did focus on X, then leave it behind.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely, like, when I joined university, I was like so swept up with everything, and
Mm.
I was going out all the time and being really hungover for training and not being particularly engaged with it. And then the second year I wasn't passive, and I had this training diary, I had this structure, and I knew what I was looking for in my own training to make it be better and better and better. Do you have a sporting ick that you can think of specific to skeleton?
Oh, Prob it's probably, I don't know why this just sprang to mind, but bad taping. Right, so
Okay.
to put this into context, aerodynamics is really important in our sport. And, because of the wind resistance, obviously, like, the smaller your frontal area, the better,
Mm,
and the more aerodynamic you are, the better. And the way that it sounds ridiculous, but the way that we tape our sled has a massive impact on that. So,
okay.
um, it's quite difficult to describe, but you've got the shell of the sled, which is the bit that you can see from the outside, and you've got the metal saddle, which is the bit that you're lying in, which is basically like hugging you so that you don't move once you're on the sled. And you've got bumpers, which are metal, exactly as they sound, metal bits that sort of stick out to stop you. Well, if you collide with the wall, it basically protects the main workings of the sled from being damaged. So you've got bumpers; it sort of protects you as well.
Sled
Um,
first, though.
yeah, sled first, far more important. Um, and basically, how you tape around all these edges and sort of bits that stick out. Um, can make a big difference on performance, but also visually, a bad tape job just looks terrible. So it's probably that, to be honest.
That's fair enough. Whenever you see like physio taping on bodies, sometimes you're like, that's been done really well. And sometimes I'm not sure that's actually helping.
Yeah.
I don't think we do well. I know when I've dinged something ever so slightly and it's above the waterline, I maybe put like a little bit of electrical tape over it until it's ready to be fixed properly. And I would try and use white electrical tape so it like blends in, or yellow electrical tape so it blends in with the shell of the boat. But if there's none to hand, then a little bit of black electrical tape will have to do, and it doesn't look good. So I can definitely understand that one. We're gonna loop back to our dying on the hill, which we sort of mentioned earlier in the best part, which I've got as an umbrella of culture, teamwork, and relationships.
Yeah, I think it's, as I said, the sport of skeleton, you're in this very intense environment where you're living with the people that you're training with, that you're competing with. And it's an intense environment. So there's a lot of work that needs to go into maintaining a positive, relaxing environment, because, it's important. You're living in it all the time. And I think, my reflection is that it's often a really neglected side of the performance formula, because it's not seen as performance, because it's not at the track or it's not on the sled. And actually, what I learned over time was that if you can have an environment that's conducive to collaboration, recovery, fun, dare I say it, I
Ooh.
know, I know, not trendy in performance sport, but
Not
it
always.
has its place. If you can generate an environment that is most of the time working for you, not against you, that is so beneficial over the long run when you're doing week after week after month in that environment. If it's wrong or if it's not serving you, it's a huge drain on performance, and it's not necessarily something that's measurable in the data in that you get at the track, or it, but it will make the sled go faster. It gets neglected because it's harder to define and harder to measure. And it also takes collective responsibility. And that's something that I really struggled with at points of my career, is that if you're sharing an environment with certain people that don't buy into that vision of respect and trust and collaboration, then it's really difficult, because you're then not pulling all in the same direction.
Or you're putting extra out to try and generate it and it's not being reciprocated.
Yeah, and
So
then it
it
ends up draining you
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that I identified early on through some fairly tricky experiences in the short term of that, of having to share an environment with people that don't share your values. And because I think, I'm quite an empathic person as well. If you do the personality, the profile stuff, I'm very green. I'm very, the environment is very important to me, and the relationships with people are very important to me. And they have to feel genuine connections for me to really thrive. I think I realized that I was particularly sensitive to that going wrong. And as soon as I identified that, I then, always made sure that whoever it was that I was living with, training with, that I put the time and effort into getting to know them as a person, and, trying to be a good teammate, a respectful teammate, because there's a lot of trust and respect involved in sharing a space and being vulnerable with someone that is also trying to beat you. And you both have to buy into that. If you're sharing a room with someone and they know that if you get a terrible night's sleep, that's going to help them,
Mm.
or if you can't find something in your room, or, there's so many different ways that you could derail someone else if you chose to be like that.
The mind
The
games.
mind games that are possible if someone wanted to try and, do something to you or be negative, or even just not. It doesn't even have to be like going out there to try and do something like that. It could just be being careless or being thoughtless. That actually, that's something that is really, really, really vital. And, I was really blessed that for the vast majority of my career, I was friends and roommates with amazing people, and that really like made the experience so good.
Mm.
Um, and that's really something that I hope that I've instilled to other athletes that are still competing in the program, that actually, protect that at all costs, because it is vital. Because when the chips are down, things aren't going well. It's easy to have fun and be nice to each other when everyone's winning medals. It's a lot harder to maintain that positivity and camaraderie when things are going wrong. So actually, if you defend that and protect it, then it will serve you really well when
Mm.
the going's rough as well.
I think it's a really interesting you said about the personality test, because I've done a similar one and I've come back very high on my empathy. But interestingly, I can't think what the word is for it now, but I'd come back as also very assertive. So I was like the opposite end. So my spotlight went literally diagonally across. And I definitely started my career in sport like really heavy as an empath.
Mm.
And then I learned that I needed to basically put on like a more assertive front. So it was very much like a learned difference. The other thing that I was going to say was really interesting about like different personalities is I remember I worked as a coach. I talk about these juniors that I worked with a lot and their dynamics. And there was a point where when they were much younger, so maybe 15, and one of the girls was very confident, very assertive. It was sort of, it came across to the other girls in the wrong way, not in a way that she anticipated it being taken, and then it was causing upset within the group dynamic. And I remember bringing her in and chatting with her, and she was horrified that it was being taken negatively and was really upset and, very tearful. And then fast forward a week and she'd like organised for them all to go out for lunch, and that they were all going to go out as a group, and it was a big team thing. And the group definitely had its ups and its downs and its positives and its negatives and, all of these things. But they did get a lot better at working with each other and also sort of like respecting different personality traits. And I would say from my own personal experience that a teammate that you're sharing a room with for 2.5 weeks or a month or however long you do a camp, they can absolutely make or break your experience, whether or not they're snoring in the night or whether or not they're just being like, do you want to go down for lunch together now, or do you want 20 minutes more, or let's go together? And you can really make or break, somebody else's experience, regardless of being competitive against one
Yeah,
another.
absolutely. And I think what gets forgotten is that there's an energy cost to being out of your comfort zone.
Mm,
And you can do it for so long, and sometimes you can get great results, for instance by being super competitive and taking a lot of motivation from beating someone else or being better than someone else. But you can't sustain that forever. You certainly can't sustain it 24/7. You might be able to do it for 2 hours a day at the track. You can't do it for months and months and months without burning out.
mm,
And I saw it play out in real time, and very quickly realized you have to have a way of compartmentalizing those different aspects of your life and your day. Because the other thing is, you can't, maybe some people can do this, but I certainly didn't want to be a skeleton athlete 24 hours a day. And already when you're in that kind of team hotel environment, it's really difficult to remove yourself and give yourself permission to switch off and relax, because you're not necessarily able to physically remove yourself from that performance environment. So you have to find ways of mentally doing it.
mm,
Otherwise you'll burn out. And I think that's again where having the right dynamic with your roommate and your teammates makes a massive difference. Because just to give an example, so Lizzie Arnold, who we were on the same podium in Pyeongchang together. She was really good at saying, right, we've done enough skeleton for today. Let's just go for a walk. Let's just
mm,
go for a cup of tea. Let's get out. And I would always tend to want to maybe overthink, overanalyze, keep looking at video, keep looking at graphs, and just, how can I be a little bit better and a little bit better? And there's obviously a place for that. And sometimes that was a real strength of mine. But actually, also sometimes it would overcook
mm.
and become a negative. And actually, so she'd be a brilliant antidote to that, um, and get me out of that sort of environment, I suppose, and
I'm
helped me
pitch
freshen up.
I'm picturing you like in the corner rocking, like reciting numbers and like little bits of data. And she's like, right, we're going to get the coffee on. We're going to get Love Island on. We're going to go for a walk.
Yeah,
Like we're
very
going to
much so.
just mellow this out a bit.
Yeah.
And there's definitely an art to, well, like you were saying, like sharing, like there's maybe that was her strong suit in a teammate. And then like you might have been like, I really think we can, oh, I'm not going to use any of the right terminology here, but this corner is going to be really hard.
Yeah.
This is my thinking on how to approach it or something.
You know what? It's really interesting because I was surprised at how many people were surprised, if that makes sense, of our friendship and our sort of competitive relationship
Mm,
around, because there's a lot of media obviously surrounding Pyeongchang because we both won medals. And I think people struggled to, I think they assumed that because we were both medal winning athletes, we must be like ultra competitive against each other all the time. And actually, as I've already described, that very much wasn't the case. We were pulling in the same direction towards the same goal. And, we worked really well together, albeit we were very different athletes. But we were, we get to the bottom of the track and we would say, oh, how was corner 9? Or I tried this and it didn't work.
mm,
And what was interesting was that we were very different athletes, very different sliders. We didn't even think about sliding in the same way necessarily, but just the very fact of having that conversation and throwing ideas backwards and forwards, and sometimes just verbalizing something that you've just done was really helpful. So I think
mm.
we both, it was net positive for both of us. And so I think, yeah, people were very surprised to learn that when it all sort of was spoken about at the Olympics, like that we genuinely were friends and helped each other and then also competed against each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that would have been the result had that relationship not been established?
Um, it's really hard to say, but I think we both played key parts in each other's
Mm,
performances,
mm,
because I lent a lot on Lizzie in the lead up to the games as well, because I'd never been to an Olympics before and she had, and she was carrying a lot of experience but also a lot of pressure from having already won gold in Sochi. She was going to defend an Olympic title and I was kind of there as the underdog tag along. So I took a lot from, you know, confidence from, well, if Lizzie's done it and she knows what she's talking about, if I could pick her brains, or as long as I do what she's doing, I'll be all right, sort of thing. So she was a massive source of confidence for me, and also like a very safe place as well, because we knew each other really well, and you could be yourself,
mm.
could be ourselves around each other. And as I said, in terms of energy cost, like if you can be yourself with somebody, that helps with recovery and helps
Yeah.
you re-energize as well. So, and I like to think that hopefully I
I was
helped
going to
her as
say,
well.
I would imagine if she's experiencing pressure because she's defending a title, to then be able to go and have a chat and like, well, see the wonder of being at an Olympic Games for your first time and then being like, oh no, it's really special. It's not just a pressure cooker environment. Like, no, I can be really excited about this. I don't have to worry about this looming sort of pressure. I imagine it was very much split.
So,
And
and I
fingers
definitely,
crossed.
I definitely found that at the second games I went to as well, because I was the experienced one at that
Mm,
point, and I was with a squad of athletes that hadn't been before.
mm,
So I was almost able to see more positives than I would otherwise have been, because
yeah,
I was always viewing it through their excitement and their kind of, experiencing things for the first time about being in the Olympic Village and all that sort of thing. And I was able to get a bit more swept up in that aspect of it that I probably would have been otherwise. So that was a huge benefit as well for
yeah.
me.
That's so lovely because it can be, it can be the person that's been before who's like, no, we need to take this really seriously instead of being like, this is, does need to be serious, but we've also put the work in already. And so we can enjoy it as well. One of the things that we mentioned before was different reactions to a coach and what they're delivering. So, like male reactions to female reactions, or just different reactions in terms of like different people reading it in a different way. So, you had quite a good example when we spoke.
Yeah, so again, it's something I became aware of, I suppose, as I grow to know myself as an athlete better, is that sort of observing how how a coach's instructions or the way that they were would land differently with different people. And I definitely experienced in a very a very stark way, I suppose, um, that things can be without wanting to overgeneralize, that I observed that the men on the team would generally react in one way and the women might react in a different way. So I think a good example is on a World Cup race week, we'd done our week of training and it was the night before the race. And the coach came to dinner, and generally speaking, we try and have dinner kind of as a downtime or off, because again, otherwise it's just so intense. But it was the night before the race, and it's normal to have a bit of a pre-race briefing, etc., etc. And he made the decision to effectively berate us, just shout at us a little bit for having had quote unquote a bad week of training, and that he thought that we weren't putting in the usual level of effort, and that he was basically not happy with what he'd seen on the track that week. And myself and my female teammate came away from that dinner so deflated and demotivated about the race the next day, because we felt so kind of like just emotionally dented from being told that that's what he thought, that we were really sort of struggling to think, oh, how are we going to turn this around and make it a really positive ending now? But what was fascinating was that when I chatted to the boys about it the next day, it was like water off a duck's back to them. And they almost took it completely differently. They were like, oh, well, yeah, that's fine, because I probably was a bit rubbish, and actually being shouted at, that's just made me want to do it better tomorrow.
Mm.
It was fascinating that they'd taken the same thing, the same situation, the same conversation, and reacted to it completely differently in a positive way. And I don't know if that was partly because it was male coach to male athletes taking it one way, and then a male coach to the female athletes, that it was the dynamic was slightly different, but it was definitely, you know, interpreted completely differently. And I just thought, what a great example of how important it is for a coach to be able to adapt the not necessarily what they're doing, but how they're communicating what
I
they're
was going to
doing,
say the
depending on who it
delivery.
is. The delivery is
Yeah.
so important. You can have the same piece of information for everybody, but depending on how you say it, it will land completely differently. And I think
Mm.
that's one of the, I suppose that's where coaching becomes an art form, is getting that right, particularly in high pressure moments. Um, so yeah, I've seen it play out in different ways over my career, and I've had lots of different worked with lots of different coaches and teammates, and seen lots of examples of it either being great or being, could be better. But I just thought there was a really interesting male female split in that situation, that
Mm.
I do wonder sometimes if we need to have a bit more of a look at how to coach women effectively,
I don't
dare I
know,
say
maybe.
it? Because we are different from men. We are wired differently, and without wanting to generalize, because obviously we're not all the same. I do think it requires a different approach sometimes to get the same end result.
Yeah, I do. I think that's such a fascinating example where you're all sat around the table and the information is being delivered. And I think in your case, like half the table were like, yeah, great. Like, yeah, fair enough. And the other table were like, how am I going to build up myself to then throw myself down this chute tomorrow morning? And it's such an interesting split, because I've worked with different athletes, but it's normally like a group of 20 or 30, and you're trying to deliver to a big group, and it's, the delivery can be harsh or firm at times, but it's such a big group. It was like, oh, she's not talking about me,
Mm,
or like, or yeah, maybe I did get that wrong and that was me, but she's generalizing to whole groups. It's
mm.
not just such a direct blow. But when you've got like 5 people, it's like, well, it is me.
Yeah, there's no getting around it. He's definitely talking about me,
There's
talking to
no
me.
getting around it. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, the delivery is important. And it's interesting, because I bet the same thing could have been said, but if the voice, like the phrase, not the phrasing, but the tone was changed, it might have been taken in a completely different way for you guys
Yeah.
as women. And it's like, look, guys, the training's not been amazing this week, but I still really think we can pull it out the bag. Let's think of like 3 things that we're going to focus on tomorrow to make sure we get X. Instead of, I don't think training's been very good this week. You're all rubbish, or
Yeah.
whatever it was. Like,
Yeah.
what was it? It's called like a shit sandwich, isn't it? It
Yes.
was like good, bad, good.
I think what I will say as well is that, you know, coaches are obviously people too. And,
100%.
you know, we are all in this pressure cooking environment and we're all trying to navigate it. And it's totally normal that you're not going to get it right all of the time.
Mm,
But I think the main thing, like from my perspective, always was, as long as there's a willingness to try and get it right and to try and improve all the time and to try and learn about each other, then that gets you like 80-90% of the way there. Because it's only when someone doesn't want to learn or help you or change, or adapt what they're doing slightly, that's kind of at the point where you're like, well, we can't,
mm.
what can we do here?
It's where the relationship just breaks down, and
Mm,
then there's lack of trust from the athlete to the coach, and then the coach is like, well, I don't think they're listening to me anyway, and
yeah.
it's just a nasty spiral. A nasty spiral. Do you have a favorite moment from your career?
I think there's a couple, and they're quite obvious, I suppose, because there'd be the Olympic medal in Pyeongchang.
It's a trick question when you talk to Olympians that have won a medal.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, the medal.
Yeah. But it was so magical, and the way that it played out was quite Hollywood as well, because so as I mentioned earlier, so Lizzie was there to defend her Olympic title, so all eyes were on her, and she'd had quite an up and down week of training and racing. So there's 4 heats in Olympics rather than 2 in a normal World Cup race. So that makes it twice as difficult, because you've got to do 2 heats on the first day and then come back and do another 2 heats on the second day, and they all count. So I was lying in 4th position overnight, and I loved that because it's like you're chasing from that point on. You've got nothing to
Mm,
lose and everything to gain. So I was, in quite a nice position overnight going into day 2. And it was, so heat 3, obviously I was trying to break into the medals. After heat 3, I was still in 4th position. And at that point I was like, oh, the last thing you want to do at Olympics is come 4th, right? Because no one wants to be just one spot out from the medals. So I was just desperately trying not to be 4th. And in the last heat, you go in reverse order, so of your current position. So I came down, put down a really good run, and I kind of had that relief of, right, I can't do anything else now. I've kind of done it, and it's it's the fate is not in my hands anymore. It's now up to what everybody else does. And my coach had said to me, like, his main piece of advice as an Olympian himself was that at an Olympics, it's 4 heats, the pressure is massive, and someone will crack. Like,
mm,
not everyone is going to do 4 good runs. He said, so if you can be the person that puts down 4 consistently good runs, it'll stand you in great stead, basically. So that was kind of what had been ringing in my ears through the whole Olympic experience, was be consistent, be good, keep showing up, don't mess up. And so I did my 4th heat, and I was like, right, I've done that. Great. I've achieved that kind of consistency of going a little bit quicker in every heat and basically putting the pressure back on other people and asking the question, can you do it too?
mm.
And so the athlete in 3rd position comes down after me, stays slightly ahead. I'm right, okay, there's still 2 more to go. Then Lizzie comes down, stays in front of me. I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to come 4th. I'm so happy for Lizzie, but I'm going to come
Yeah.
4th. And then the final athlete comes down the hill, and it's kind of in slow motion in my head that I'm seeing. I knew that I could see from the monitor that I was watching that it wasn't a good run. And I could see her time deficit coming down and down and down and back towards us in the right direction. But I didn't know how far down the order she was going to drop. So it wasn't until the very last split that it was going to go one way or the other. And I was just watching. I could barely watch the screen because I was so nervous, but I was just watching for her rank number that was going to come at the end, whether it was a 3 or a 4. And I knew that if it was a 4, I'd won a medal, and she crossed the line, and I saw the four, and the whole place just went wild because the stand was full of Brits. It was full of friends and family,
Mm.
Team GB staff, athletes that had finished their events or what have you. So it it just went completely bonkers because it was this double celebration of Lizzie. Not only had Lizzie defended her title, but I'd also
Got a medal
got a
as
medal
well.
as well. And it turns out that I got the medal by 200ths of a second over 4
Oh,
runs.
it's making me sweat just
Yeah.
thinking about
And
it.
I still think about that now and think, where were those 200ths and how different things could have been if it had gone the other way, and like
Oh,
how many tiny things about my performance that I'd focused on getting right, that if I
mm,
hadn't done that, it would have been the other way around.
mm,
Um, and so the way that it all came together in that moment was just magical. And the fact that Lizzie and we started the sport on the same day, we came through the same Girls for Gold program. We had very different career paths. As I said before, I didn't get to go to that first Olympics. She went and won a medal, won a gold medal.
mm.
But then our careers had basically reconverged, and we were at Olympic Games together finally. We were really good friends by this
Yeah.
point. And the fact that, how many people get to stand on an Olympic podium with one of their best friends? It just very rarely happens.
Mm,
It never happened before for Brits in the Winter Olympics. So it was just really, really magical and
yeah.
a real pinch me moment. And I relive it every now and again, and I kind of see it through my own eyes, but it almost feels like I'm remembering a dream rather than reality, because it had that kind of otherworldly, slightly unreal quality to it.
Mm.
Um, so that, yeah, I will treasure that one forever.
It's magical. I'm going to bring you back down to earth. Do you have a best fuck up? Can be a silly
Uh,
one or a major one.
Well, I've already spoken about not getting to the first Olympics, so I'll go for something else. My very first international race, I came out of the sled, popped out of the groove at the top when I was pushing it, and that completely ruined. Like, there's no coming back from that as a
No.
skeleton athlete. And a lot of your training is to try and learn how not to do that. So your one of your runners is basically sat in this little groove, and you've got to push the sled in a very balanced way to not let it jump out, essentially. And I was, we're not very experienced at that point, and I was trying too hard. I was very nervous, and the sled came out of the groove and completely ruined my race. And I was convinced that I was going to get sent home because, like, I've spoken about the pressure before.
Mm.
I was convinced that they were just going to be like, "Well, she doesn't have what it takes. I'm going to send her home."
Send you home.
And so I was terrified that was going to happen. And in fact, obviously it didn't. They just wanted me to learn from it and improve. But yeah, that was a real moment of, oh my God, like,
When that happens, is that then you tumbling down at all, or is it just like it pops out and it's like that run
it
stops?
really depends. So at that point, self-preservation is everything, and the
Yeah.
best way to do that is to get on the sled. So people will try every which way they can to still get on the sled.
Okay.
And sometimes, I mean, it can look quite comical because you're all over the place, but because the thing is, if you don't get on the sled, the likelihood is that you might end up letting go of it. If you're not on the sled, it might hit you. So
Right.
it's a safety thing as well. The safest place to be is on the sled.
Yeah.
So you do everything in your power to somehow wrestle yourself onto the sled and sort of salvage the run somehow. And like, some are worse than others. Sometimes you have a complete, what they call a yard sale, where you're kind of just all over the place. And sometimes you can't keep hold of your sled, and then it goes down the track without you. And that is the worst, because it then hits every wall going, and then you've got to basically completely rebuild it.
Oh.
Yeah, so you avoid that at all costs, basically.
Oh.
But yeah, in the moment, it is just self-preservation. And then once you're on the sled, it's right. How do I try and salvage this now?
How do I fix this?
Yes.
What is one thing you would like to change about your sport for the better? Or is there anything that springs to mind?
Um, I just wish more people knew about it, I think, because
Mm.
it's such a interesting sport. It's exciting. It's fast paced. There's great people doing it. Great characters in the sport, and I think it suffers from being a because it's an Olympic sport, it's only in the spotlight really once every 4 years.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm really wanting to try and change, is that bring it to a bigger audience for more of that Olympic cycle, because, you know, it's an amazing thing to watch, people hurtling down an ice chute at 80 miles an hour,
I was gonna
separated by hundredths of a second, you
I
know?
was gonna say, all whenever it's on in terms of the Winter Olympics, it's always something that you want to watch
Yeah.
is the skeleton,
Yeah.
because it is so fast and it's so exciting. But then you don't hear about it for the next 3 and a bit years.
Yeah. And so I just wish that it was, I guess, more readily available for
Mm.
people to tune in and see, and get to know the characters as well, because, you know, one thing about skeleton is that everybody is an interesting character, because there's a story as to how they got there,
Mm.
because especially in the UK, nobody's born doing skeleton.
Nobody's born on the
No,
slope.
you've come to it through doing something else, through having different experiences, and so you have this really interesting melting pot of people,
Mm.
who are all trying to do the same thing, but in wildly different ways sometimes. And yeah, it's fascinating, and it's one of these sports that you know, there's always something new to learn
Mm.
about it. It's fascinating. There's so much going on. So yeah, I just wish more people knew it and understood it, I guess.
Yeah. That is a good one. Final 2 questions. You're on the home straight. Do you have one piece of advice that you would tell younger Laura, or any of our younger female listeners, or female listeners who are just getting into sport, or just in general, or a mantra?
I think trust your gut, and it's very general, but I think if you listen to yourself and listen to your instincts, listen to what your body's telling you, that will get you a long way. Because, you know, whether it's physically um, pushing yourself enough but not overcooking it, or whether it's assessing a situation, um, and trying to work out who to trust, or what route to go down with, you know, what am I going to focus on? If you trust yourself, you listen to your own instinct and your gut 99% of the time, that is the right thing to do. And I think I definitely fell into the trap of, especially early in my career, because I was new to the sport, I didn't think to listen to myself enough, because I always assumed that somebody else knew better.
Mm.
And yes, they did know better possibly about, you know, the technicalities of the sport, but they didn't necessarily know better about me.
Yeah.
And I think it took me time to realize that. And it became a real sort of mantra of mine later on, and a strength, that I would always check back in with myself, listen to what my gut is saying. Because most of the time it's your subconscious trying to nudge you into something that you already know
Mm.
at a certain level, and trying to sort of push you into making the right decision. So yeah, just kind of tune into what your body's saying, listen to your gut, because it'll
It's
help you.
normally right.
Yeah, it's normally right.
That is, yeah, I completely agree. And I resonate with that so much, getting into a sport I knew nothing about. And everyone seemed to have an idea of what you were supposed to do. And you really trust those people, rightly or wrongly. And 9 times out of 10, they're not just like leading you down the garden path, but also they don't know you
Mm.
either at that point, and it takes time and balance, and people wanting to know how to get it right, basically, in order to get it right. My final question for you is, what is your soundtrack of the week? On the spot.
Probably my daughter asking me for snacks. That's probably supposed to be a song, but that seems to be the theme at the moment.
Oh.
Is being asked for snacks. Yes, I think she's going through a growth spurt at the moment.
Oh,
So.
fair enough. Fair enough. We like a girl that fuels. Do you have a favourite song though that you would like to play in training, or anything like that?
I basically, so this is a really boring answer, but it's very mood dependent. So I will always try and find something that will get me to the mood that I want to be in. And so that can be, so people used to ask me like, what's on your warm-up playlist?
Yeah.
And I would literally decide on the day each time, because sometimes I felt like I'd need something really like to help me focus in and calm down. Sometimes I'd need something to help me energize. Sometimes I'd want something with lyrics to give me a distraction. Sometimes I wouldn't want lyrics because I have things to think about. So it it really, I just always just go with my gut, go with what felt right on the day.
Okay, I won't push you any further for an answer. Well, that is all of our questions done. Thank you so much for letting me into your house.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to the episode with the wonderful Laura. I hope you really enjoyed it. I've realised that I need to start doing outros and stop ending everything quite so abruptly. So here you go. You can find Laura on Instagram at skeleton_Laura_GB. She's doing lots of bits at the moment, so it's, will be interesting to keep an eye on what she's up to. If you did really enjoy this episode, don't be shy, leave a comment. Was it like, share, follow, subscribe, all the rest of it? And if you particularly enjoyed any podcast episodes that we've done before this episode, then please like, share, follow, and subscribe to all of those as well. I don't think we have all of those buttons, but yeah, let us know that you liked it, because it really does make a huge difference to everything. And if you're new to the podcast and this is the first ever episode you've listened to, then please scroll back, have a look through and see if there's anything else you fancy. As we draw closer to the end of October, in the last few weeks now, we get closer to the 6-month birthday of Only Dead Fish Go With The Flow podcast, which is absolutely insane. Thank you so much to everybody who has listened and sent messages of encouragement and comments, and all the guests who have given up their hour or 2 hours of time to come and be involved with it. And we also now have just over 250 listeners across all platforms that we are streaming on: Apple, Spotify, and Amazon Music. We haven't just been doing podcast recordings. We have got a little bit of merch in the pipeline. So if you are interested in that, make sure you follow us on Instagram at Only Dead Fish Podcast. And that will be where we will announce and probably promote some of that merch. So stay tuned. Bye-bye.